The Kansas City Chiefs have made several roster changes this week due to injuries, but today they made two surprising moves that are definitely worth discussing. One of these players might even have an impact on Kansas City's game plan for Monday Night Football against the Saints, so I've got to talk about that. I'll also cover an update on Rashee Rice, some news about other injured wide receivers and running backs, and more. Before diving into the Saints versus Chiefs preview, let's look at all the roster changes that have happened recently. The Chiefs opened up the 21-day window for running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire to return from the NFI list, where he's been for the first 4 weeks of the season. Although he's been attending meetings, working out, and even traveling with the team, he hasn't been able to practice until this week. Head coach Andy Reid mentioned that Clyde has been practicing with the scout team to get back into the rhythm. Reid wasn't ready to say if Clyde would be activated in time for Monday Night Football, but it's definitely possible considering the current injury situation. We'll have to wait and see, but with an open roster spot, Clyde's return could be sooner rather than later. Now, the Chiefs had two open spots on the active roster after placing Rashee Rice on injured reserve yesterday. This means Rice will miss at least the next 4 games. However, there's some good news. There's still hope that his injury isn't season-ending. Nate Taylor and others reported that Rice was seen in the locker room walking normally without crutches, although he had a leg sleeve on his right leg due to swelling around his knee. It's important to remember that even if someone looks okay walking, they can still have underlying issues. According to Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, Rice is expected to have his knee scoped next week once the swelling goes down. There's concern it could be an ACL or PCL injury. Diana Rini from The Athletic added that Rice will test his knee next week and undergo an arthroscopic procedure to get a closer look. If the findings are minor, he might only need a small repair or even just time to heal, potentially allowing him to return in 6 to 8 weeks. But if it's more serious, he could be out for the season. All of Chiefs Kingdom is anxiously waiting to see the results of the procedure. Either way, Rice will be out for a while as he's placed on IR. In other news, Patrick Mahomes addressed the media yesterday and was asked about the interception from the last game that led to Rice's injury. Mahomes said he didn't realize what happened at first, but felt terrible after watching the replay. He wasn't worried about himself, just about Rice's injury. Patrick Mahomes also shared his thoughts on the incident, saying he hopes the injury wasn't as bad as it looked because he felt responsible for it. It's rare to hear Mahomes use strong language in a press conference, which shows how deeply he's affected by the situation. Losing a key player like Rashee Rice early in the game makes things much harder for the offense. When your top wide receiver goes down, you have to adjust the game plan on the fly, which can be tough. Mahomes explained that it's easier to create a game plan if you know ahead of time that a player won't be able to participate. This week, they're in a better position since they've had extra time to prepare, given that it's a Monday night game. Plus, they have Andy Reid. If anyone can create an effective game plan despite missing key players, it's him. Reid also spoke with the media, expressing his disappointment for Rice, but he's optimistic as they wait for the results of next week's tests. Injuries are part of the sport, and while there's no replacement for Rice, Reid believes in the guys they have on the roster. He's confident they'll be fine, especially when it comes to the wide receiver position. But the Chiefs' injury woes don't stop there. Another wide receiver is also dealing with an injury, which adds to the chaos. The Chiefs made some roster moves today, adding one player to the active roster and signing another to the practice squad. I'll get into that and share more thoughts on the upcoming game against the Saints. Earlier, I mentioned there were two open spots on the 53-man roster. One of those is likely reserved for Clyde Edwards-Helaire if he's ready to return soon. They might leave it open throughout his 21-day window, but the other spot, created by placing Rashee Rice on IR, was filled today. Surprisingly, it wasn't a wide receiver, but rather tight end Jody Fortson. Fortson joined the Chiefs practice squad in late September, about a week and a half ago, after spending some time with the Miami Dolphins during the offseason. The Chiefs brought him in when tight end Baylor Cupp was placed on the practice squad injured list. Instead of signing another receiver to the 53-man roster, they chose to add Fortson. The decision is a bit puzzling, considering not only is Rashee Rice out, but wide receiver mecole Hardman also appeared on the injury report this week with a knee issue. He was limited in practice yesterday and didn't participate today, which isn't a good sign for his availability on Monday Night Football. That leaves the team with just 4 healthy receivers: Juju Smith-Schuster, Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, and Sky Moore. Interestingly, the Chiefs now have as many healthy wide receivers as they do tight ends. The tight ends are Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, Jared Y., and now Jody Fortson. Fortson is a big-bodied target, often used in similar ways to how Justin Ross is utilized, especially for 50-50 balls and red zone plays. In fact, the Chiefs have used Fortson in the past, specifically for red zone touchdowns. If Fortson suits up, expect him to play a similar role. He's a strong blocker and could contribute more on special teams as well. KC might choose to use multiple tight end sets to get their run game going against the Saints. This could be a good strategy, especially since the Chiefs currently have the highest rushing success rate in the league, sitting at 52.1% through the first 4 weeks of the season. Absolutely. Let's run the ball. I'm all for using multiple tight ends on the field to strengthen the run game. This strategy could open up passing opportunities through play action if Andy Reid and the coaching staff decide to go that route. With both Travis Kelce and Noah Gray being reliable targets, and now Jody Fortson added into the mix, the Chiefs have solid options, especially in the red zone. It's worth noting that Fortson was a converted wide receiver, which gives them even more flexibility as the wide receiver room faces challenges due to injuries. Speaking of injuries, hardman has been used sparingly on offense, but has been the main punt and kick returner. Special teams coordinator Dave Tube mentioned today that if Mecole can't go, either Nico Reggio or Montrell Washington could step in as returners through practice squad elevations. Given that Hardman was limited yesterday and didn't practice today, it's likely one of those players will be called up to take over return duties. I lean toward Montrell Washington since he performed well in a similar role last season, averaging 7.6 yards per punt return with a long of 23 yards. Of course, there's a chance they might go with Nico Reggio instead, who could also contribute on offense if needed. We'll find out this weekend when the practice squad elevations are announced. I'm a bit surprised they opted for Fortson on the 53-man roster, instead of one of the 3 receivers on the practice squad, Justin Ross, Nico Reggio, or Montrell Washington. I've heard whispers that Justin Ross might be dealing with a minor injury, but since there's no requirement to report injuries for practice squad players, it's hard to confirm. At the end of the day, I'm just a fan like you, and I trust the coaching staff to make the right decisions. Regardless, any of those receivers can still be fully utilized if elevated from the practice squad, and at least one of them will definitely be called up for Monday's game. On another note, with Jody Fortson being signed to the active roster, one spot opened up on the practice squad, which has now been filled by cornerback Darius Rush. You might recognize his name. He was a 5th-round pick by the Colts in the 2023 NFL Draft and spent some time on the Chiefs roster and practice squad last season. Rush is a 6'2", 198-pound defensive back who ran a 4.36 in the 40-yard dash, giving him an impressive 9.81 relative athletic score. While it's unclear how long he'll stay on the practice squad or if he'll see the field, he definitely brings some athleticism to the team. Speaking of cornerbacks, defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo spoke to the media today and praised Jalen Watson, the team's current cornerback number 2. Watson has been playing well, although he missed out on an interception last week. Spagnuolo noted that explosive plays have hurt the defense a couple of times, but overall, he feels the defense is performing well, especially against the run. This week, they'll need to keep that momentum going as they face Alvin Kamara of the Saints. Kamara has been impressive, with at least 77 rushing yards in every game so far this season. He not only has 5 rushing touchdowns but also over 200 receiving yards and a touchdown through the air. I believe the Chiefs will do a solid job stopping the run, as they've consistently shut down talented running backs like Derrick Henry, Zach Moss, Bijan Robinson, and J.K. Dobbins. However, they'll need to keep an eye on Kamara as a safety valve for quarterback Derek Carr in the passing game. This is why I expect him to have a higher number of receiving yards, according to my picks on Underdog. By the way, Derek Carr and his team started the season strong, scoring back-to-back 40-point games against the Panthers and Cowboys. However, they've since cooled off, managing only 12 points against the Eagles and 24 points against the Falcons in 2 closely contested losses. The Saints could easily be 4-0, just like the Chiefs, who have also pulled off 4 one-score victories. In the last 2 games, Carr has thrown just 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. You can bet he's eager for a win, possibly wanting this victory more than any other this season, especially considering he's 1-8 in his career against Patrick Mahomes. He has some solid receivers to work with, like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, who have combined for 517 yards and 3 touchdowns. However, his tight end options, Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson have been quiet, failing to reach 100 total yards. Juwan Johnson is also listed on the injury report with a hand or wrist injury, so we'll see how that affects the team. The Saints might look to get their tight ends more involved, especially since the Chiefs' defense has struggled against tight ends all season. Another important player for the Saints is Taysom Hill, a versatile guy who can play running back, tight end, or quarterback. However, he hasn't practiced the last couple of days due to multiple fractured ribs. If he plays on Monday, he won't be at 100%, and that could be a significant loss for the Saints' offense. Despite Hill's potential absence, the Saints' offense remains a strong threat, currently ranking as the #1 scoring offense, averaging 31.8 points per game. They're also the second-best team on third downs and in the red zone. The Chiefs' defense will definitely have their hands full, especially since Coach Spagnuolo noted the need to stop giving up points early in the game. So far this season, Kansas City's defense has allowed points on every opening drive, whether a field goal or a touchdown. That's why it's crucial for the defense to improve on third downs early in the game. Limiting early points is key. If the Saints reach the red zone, the defense must aim to hold them to field goals instead of touchdowns, or better yet, snag an interception for a pick six. Another critical point is that the Saints' offensive line is banged up in several key areas. Guard Cesar Ruiz hasn't practiced due to a knee injury, and another lineman, Shane Lemieux, is dealing with an ankle issue and hasn't practiced either. Their starting center, Eric McCoy, is on IR following recent groin surgery. Additionally, left tackle Taysom Hill has been limited all week with a back knee issue. It seems the majority of their roster is dealing with injuries. Even Alvin Kamara has been limited with hip and rib issues. In contrast, the Chiefs appear to be relatively healthy on the defensive side. Linebacker Nick Bolton, defensive end Mike Dana, and defensive tackle Derek Nottie are the only players listed on the injury report. Bolton, who has a hamstring injury, has practiced fully all week and is expected to play. Dana missed last week's game, and while he was limited in practice this week, it's uncertain if he will be available on Monday. Finally, Derek Nottie, dealing with a triceps injury, has also practiced fully and is expected to suit up. This is where I expect Chris Jones and his teammates to cause chaos, especially against an offensive line that's been struggling with injuries. They need to get to Carr and rattle him. Chris Jones is having an incredible season, so look for him to exploit the weaknesses in that offensive line, just like he did last week against the Chargers. Now, flipping to the other side of the field, Mahomes and his team need to find their rhythm without their top three playmakers. While Kelce is a key target, they're missing Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Isaiah Pacheco. Mahomes will surely lean heavily on Kelce, but the Saints' defense will do everything to take him away. That means we'll likely see increased roles for players like Richie James and Juju Smith-Schuster, along with Noah Gray getting more involved. The Chiefs will also need to rely on their run game for reasons mentioned earlier. One thing to keep an eye on is running back Kareem Hunt, who has been limited in practice all week due to a shoulder injury from his first game back with the Chiefs last week. However, I believe he will still play. If he can't go, it leaves the rookie Carson Steele and Samaje Perine to shoulder the majority of the load. Given that Steele has had some ball security issues, I'm not thrilled about that possibility. But again, I expect Hunt to play, especially if Clyde Edwards-Helaire isn't ready to return from the non-football injury list. The Chiefs' offense must play clean football, please. They currently have the third worst turnover differential in the league, tied with the Raiders at -4. To make matters worse, the Saints are tied for the third most takeaways, with 8. The Chiefs are near the top for turnovers, with Mahomes throwing 5 interceptions, the most in the NFL, followed closely by Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. Plus, Carson Steele has had 2 fumbles. If the Chiefs want to win, they must cut down on turnovers and penalties, which is something Andy Reid emphasized in his press conference. So, clean football and no penalties from Jawan Taylor will greatly improve the Chiefs' chances, even with Rashee Rice out and Hunt not at 100%. It won't be easy, as the Chiefs' offense is currently middle of the pack or below average in several metrics. They rank 24th in red zone touchdown percentage, 12th on third downs, 14th in points per game with 23, and 15th in yards per game. This is going up against a Saints defense that excels at preventing touchdowns in the red zone, ranking first, and is also 7th in rushing yards allowed and 6th in scoring defense. It's going to be a tough challenge. One thing to note is that the Saints give up the 9th most passing yards per game, so maybe Mahomes and his team can capitalize on that. There are also some familiar faces on the Saints to keep an eye on. Safety Tyrann Mathieu, defensive tackle Colin Saunders, and linebacker Willie Gay. However, Willie Gay injured his hand in last week's game and hasn't practiced, so he might not play. Overall, this game is going to be a fun fight. I have a lot of respect for the Saints. With the Chiefs at home, the crowd needs to be loud. I wouldn't mind seeing a decibel record broken. Most analysts expect the Chiefs to win, but they'll need a few things to go their way, including a vintage performance from Patrick Mahomes and some deep catches from worthy players. The run game must carry the load, with the wide receiver room and tight ends stepping up too. They also need to limit turnovers. If they can do all this, I think they can still win, but it's going to be a nail-biter. I predict a final score of 21-17. It won't be easy, but I believe the Chiefs can pull it off with Andy Reid and Spagnuolo coaching an excellent game. With all that said, I'd love to hear your score predictions and thoughts on the game based on the injuries and roster moves. Until next time, let's go.